All right, everybody, good to have you this morning. And so welcome to our webinar. We're going to be talking about distress projects this morning. And so let me show you something before we get started. And so some of you have been on other programs with me or other training. I want you to see this first. Behind me, as you look at me, you're going to notice that I'm in a hospital bed, and that's because this is me. And so I ripped a quad tendon on my right leg during Gramps camp, putting up the slip and slide for the 10 grandkids stay with us all week. And then I was waiting to have surgery the next week on Tuesday. And on Saturday night, I fell and ripped the quad tendon on my second leg, a freaky kind of deal. And I know, and my doctor said he had never seen anybody with two ripped quad tendons at two separate times. So anyway, that's where I am right now. I'm in my basement and in a hospital bed. And so I'm learning how to walk. This is week 11. And so I had to stay in bed 6 weeks. And so this is now week 11. And so anyway, learn how to walk right now. And so I've got my walker and I'm making progress every week. 2 weeks ago, I took my first 7 steps. And so I'm up to about 500 now. And so that's why when you look at me it looks like I'm in a bed, I am in a bed. I am in a hospital bed in my basement. So welcome this morning. Today, we're going to talk about distress projects and how to recover the failing project. And so distress projects, let me kind of give a real simplified definition. A distress project is different than a project needing total recovery. Even though we're going to talk about some of the recovery efforts and we're going to talk about a health checkup, when we talk about project recovery, that project is going to be worse than what we're talking about today. That's going to be the project that we've tried all these other things, and what's happened is it's fallen apart, and so we're going to full-blown recovery. And so we've talked about recovery a couple of months ago in one of the webinars. Distress project is in better shape than that type of project, but it is giving us some bumps along the way that we're needing to take a look at. So in defining the distress project, projects which have diminished performance to such a level that management questions its success. And so that's a real pivot point, I know, as far as how bad is bad. And it's going to be different on every project. But the point is that you're having enough problems with that project, hitting the performance of time, hitting your performance of cost, that everybody's starting to kind of look at it and you're starting to wonder, okay, do I have the wrong team? Do I have the wrong vendor? Do I have the wrong project manager? And a lot of those questions are being asked. And even if they're not asked yet, you definitely start thinking about some of those types of things. So a distress project is having some bumps along the way, and people are starting to question, is the performance going to be bad? Is this project going to finish at all, or is this something that we're going to have to do more to? So we're going to talk about some of that more of what we have to do to pull it together. So it usually demonstrates low performance over time or more than once in the metrics. And so it's not like you just had a little hiccup. We all have those, and even a couple of little hiccups. We all have those. So those are kind of normal project. Welcome to the world of project management. That's why we're all on medication, is because of the hiccups. Okay, but for the purpose of this, what we're looking at is it's some of those consistent things to where you're really tracking it hot and heavy on time, and you're trying your best to really kind of monitor and keep it on track, but yet you keep having those hiccups, and it's like, man, I'm putting out another fire kind of thing. It can turn into an unrecoverable project if left unchecked, and no steps of action are taken to turn around the lagging action. And that's not the way most of us run. After we start having a few bumps, we start taking steps to turn that project around. All right, so PM Times reports that, and this was a quote I thought was interesting. He said, this gentleman, Flynn, said, in our consulting practice, we generally use the term distressed to represent a project or program that's 20% off its cost and scheduled baseline targets. It exhibits missed milestones and has missed key deliverables. And I like that. I like that definition, because we're not talking about a hiccup. We all have those. We're talking about something that you're starting to see the trend. You're starting to see that pattern where the project is starting to get further behind, or it's costing more than what anybody has thought. Now, before we go into some of these other points, let me mention a couple of things. One of the first things that I would look at if I'm starting to experience some of this, I would look at, where did my estimates come from? Did my estimates come from myself and the team, to where we put those estimates together, or did I inherit those estimates? Now, the reason why that's a big issue for us today, I know many of you don't do the estimating. You inherit a due date, you inherit a budget, and so you run the project based on that budget and that timeline. And many times that's not a problem. You've inherited it from somebody who is more experienced or a subject matter expert or a manager who has been doing this for a while, and the budget and the due date, it is what it is. Okay. However, if you start noticing that, wow, it doesn't seem like any of these dates are right, it doesn't seem like this money is even coming close to what it's actually costing us, those kind of feelings and those kind of thoughts kind of come to the project manager as you start working on this. And then that's what we're talking about, is that's where you start realizing, okay, these estimates, maybe it was right before, but it's not right now. And maybe it was good 10 years ago to have this estimate, but this estimate's not even close right now. And those of you who are doing construction, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Literally in 6 months, your pricing for building a house, building any kind of construction has just skyrocketed like crazy. Here in Springfield, we see houses that have stopped because it was the price of all the resources has gone up so much that people have just started putting their houses on hold. But my point in saying this is, where did the estimate come from? If it came from a knowledgeable source and it came from a subject matter expert, somebody who's knowledgeable, then it is what it is, and you're trying to contain it. But sometimes I know for a fact, and maybe it's different where you are, but sometimes I know that people have just thrown numbers together and they've thrown a due date together. And sometimes with all of those events, that's what happens. And we find out, wow, we're struggling with these particular things. All right, so there's some influences of distress projects that we get into. So one of those would be top-down influence. Management is overseeing this. Management wants reports on this project. And normally when it gets into, we start having some distress at 20%, you'll notice that you're going to a lot more meetings about this project, and you've got a lot more people showing up at the team meetings or looking at certain reports. And absolutely, you're going to have more of that. You're going to have output items. So in other words, what are we producing? What's coming out of this project? Are we hitting deliverables? Are we hitting the milestones? Is the vendor hitting deliverables? Is the vendor hitting milestones? And then you've got internal influence, the frustration of the team. Also, is the team, is this the right team? Do we have the right expertise in this group? And so that might be a piece of it too. And then you've got input items. Now the input items, let's go right back to, where did the estimate come from? That would be an input item. If you did not do the estimate, the team did not do the estimate, and you inherited the estimate for a duration and they inherited the due date. And sometimes it is what it is. We have that on projects. But the point is, that's the input item. So what is the quality of those input items into that? If you didn't get to select your team, did you inherit your team from because someone else picked the team? All of those can have an impact on that distress project. It is possible we don't have the right people or we don't have the right expertise. And so there are several influences on that. So when we talk about input items, limited or wrong information, specific communications, sporadic communications. Let me put my glasses on. Little or no data analysis. So we're making decisions, but we're not really analyzing the data to look for trends. Also, problem resolution without analysis. So we're not really doing a root cause analysis. When we talk about top-down influence, limited management support, or you're asking management 4 or 5 times before they respond. Changing organizational priorities, inability to prioritize projects. And so all projects are looked at as number one. And if you're in that situation, we talk about this all the time. Also, the project priority changes frequently. This is number one right now, but then in 2 weeks, this is number one and that's number 3. And so you see some of that rotation of projects with priority. And then shuffling resources. We've got a limited amount of people, but I've got 300 projects that we're trying to do with this limited amount of people. So we bring people and switch them around to put out fires. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And then you've got your output items, problems, products with defects, products completion is slow, products do not possess proper features. And so in other words, what we're producing, we're not producing the level of quality. And so depending on what your project is, that level of quality is starting to come into question. And then, of course, the internal is going to be limited resources, untrained resources, which is not that uncommon right now, bottlenecks for approvals, and then resources on too many projects. And so we've got, rather than having 5 projects you're on 15. And so you find yourself going to meetings all the time and not really producing anything. All right, so is the project heading for trouble? This is always our question that we have to look at. Now, we don't want to be a doomsday prophet, and I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. We don't want to be the person who, the project's always in terrible, my team sucks, everything's bad, my vendor is horrible. I mean, you don't want to be that kind of person. And so you're wanting to be a person who's optimistic, but at the same time, you want to be able to know if my project's going into an area for that is trouble, then I want to be able to pull it around or turn it around. So let's take a look at some things here. So in other words, let's break it down into 3 sections here, just for talking points for us: some symptoms, some consequences, and what's the impact of those symptoms and consequences. And so that's how we're looking at this. Now, I gave you just some processes and some documents or artifacts here, because a lot of times this is some information that would help us be able to distinguish that my project's going to have some bumps along the way, more so than normal. So you'll notice on the left-hand side, I put business case. Your business case could tell you up front that you're going to have some problems with it, because if the business case was written totally from a pie in the sky standpoint, this is the greatest project of all times, it's going to make us the most money, or it's going to give us the biggest benefits and value of all times, sometimes you'll see the skew in the business case. The charter might be a piece of it as well. The charter sometimes is bullet points and not enough information, and so what happens is it's really hard to tell what the output of that project should be. And then of course the plan itself, how detailed is the plan? Now, if we are running traditional project management, that plan should be really detailed. If you're running Scrum or one of the agile methodologies, you're going to be doing it in the sprints and iterations, and so that sprint or iteration is going to be very detailed to produce those that output in 4 or 5 weeks or 7 weeks, whatever it is. But the point is that what you look at the plan. What about the team? Do they have enough skills? Do they have the skills that we're really needing? And then the handoff. How good was the handoff to the customer, or to the customer at the end of a sprint or an iteration, or at the end of the overall project? And then the closing itself. How good was the closing? So let's look at a couple of things here. So let's look at symptoms first off. So you have numerous sign-offs. This sometimes is where one of the problems is. As you know, in a process improvement, one of the things you try to do is get rid of as many sign-offs or stopping points as possible. And next month, we're going to be talking about process improvement. But what you're looking at with a sign off, here's the negative of a sign off. It takes time. And if that person's not there to sign off, then once again, you're in a waiting mode. You're wanting to remove all the waiting modes that you possibly can have. Now, that doesn't mean that all sign offs are bad. Don't mistake what I'm saying here. What you want is for there to be real sign offs that mean something, not just little nitpicky stuff that's slowing your project down. Radical changes. So what the charter says and what the project plan says is going to be 2 different things, because the customer has changed their mind, or the customer has added a bunch of extra things. And then adjusting the plan and estimates. Those are some symptoms sometimes. How much adjustment do we have? Now, you're always going to adjust the plan some. You're always going to adjust your schedule a little bit. You might even adjust your budget a little bit. But the point is that I'm talking about radical sweeping changes. A lot of times that's a symptom of that we didn't do a good job gathering the scope of the work. And so we find ourselves having to go back and interview the customer. Now, all these things happen in different type of projects, but we're talking about this is a pattern is what we're looking at. High team turnover, low morale. The team hates coming to the team meetings. They hate working on the project we're working on. And you see people quitting off of the team if they have that ability. And then of course the handoffs are late. The customer's not getting many of these things. So those are some of the symptoms that you're looking at. So the second part of this is going to be the consequences. So are we waiting for sign-offs? Is there confusion over what the scope of work should be? Then see, there should never be a confusion about the scope. We need to be able to eat, breathe, and understand that scope of work. Even if a change order happens and that change order gets approved, then we need to understand what that new scope is so that everybody is on the right page. Do we have constant training of new staff because we're churning people? Also, do we have unhappy customer because it's always late, it's never there on time? All of those can be some of the consequences. And then let's look at the impact. So what happens by the time it gets to that point? Well, the customer has no confidence in us because Once again, we're always turning something in late, or it's not working the way that the customer was wanting. We could have less revenue because, once again, the business case said we were going to have a certain level of revenue, and that revenue might be far less. We could have a potential loss of a customer to where that customer doesn't want to work with us anymore because of that. Or we could ensure, and of course, the other impact could be to ensure organizational identity. And so, once again, the handoffs, if the handoffs are bad with the customer, then that's going to hurt the organizational identity. And so all of these type of things we look at, and of course, obviously, they can get much stronger than this and let you know that the project's in trouble. But sometimes some of these are very subtle, but if they're left alone and we do nothing about it, that project's going to have ultimate trouble down the road. So let's talk a little bit about some types of project failure. So it's not like everything is bad on a project. In most cases, we hope it's not like that. Most cases it's not. Okay, so let's talk about the first. Let's say everything's okay, but you're having a budget failure. The budget for the project was recommended by upper management 3 years prior to its beginning, and some of you get caught into that for some of your projects. This concerns the project manager, but upper management was unwilling to make any adjustments to the budget because that was the approved budget. Now, this comes up in class quite often. Many of you maybe experience this. And this is what it is. Your budget cycle for your projects is a year, 18 months, 3 years down the road. And so you create the best budget you can possibly create, and it has to go through the process. And so you get money back, but maybe it's not enough, or maybe it's things have changed drastically in that budget cycle, but from the time you estimated it to the time you received it. Some of you have this all the time. Okay, so budget might be a piece of it. And so then we're looking at how can we trim the scope to meet the budget is what many people will do. And so you find yourself going back and forth. And of course, management needs to be part of this. If you don't have authority over the budget, and many project managers don't, management has to be part of this, because they have to see up front, the moment that the money comes through, that this is what that money will pay for, and here's how much more money is needed. And so with management being part of the solution on the front end, they're able to help resolve this. Second type of project failure that you might want to look at is risk. In many cases, we do a horrible job with risk analysis, and maybe your organization's different, but many times we don't do very good with this anyway. And so the sponsor, the customer, upper management did not feel risk analysis was necessary for this project because everyone agreed it needed to be completed. And so team members were encouraged not to look at risk or waste time conducting quantitative risk analysis. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into this topic. So when we look at risk analysis is not to determine whether or not we're going to do the project. It's to determine what could go wrong on the project. So when we're doing a make or buy analysis up front, then you're determining whether or not we can afford to do the project and whether we should do it in-house or whether we should vendor it out. But with risk management, you're looking to see what could hurt this project, what could hurt its time, the duration, what could hurt the money, what could hurt my team. You're looking at anything that could potentially go wrong. And of course, you're creating mitigation strategies and contingency strategies for this. So when you're looking at risk, if we don't look at risk, and that's the pattern or the culture of our organization, there could be a huge risk that's a showstopper for this project that we haven't even caught on to until it actually happens. And then we're all in crisis mode. And many of us know exactly what that is. You run from crisis to crisis, or you put out fires on every project every so often. And we all do that. But risk could be a type of failure. Next is going to be the staffing failure. Now, across the country right now, this is a huge piece, and maybe this is affecting you. Many projects are being put on hold because they don't have resources to be able to work on some of these projects. So subject matter experts and resources assigned to the project are removed during times of crisis or for a high-profile customer. Having team members removed at unexpected times creates gaps in the performance and work of the project. Now, in this particular case, when I was putting the slides together, I went in from the aspect that we're moving people off that you really needed on that project, or on that part of the project at that time. And that's what we are seeing happen right now. But the reason why that's happening is we don't have enough resources or enough staff for many of our organizations. Many projects are being put on hold right now. They don't have enough project managers. They don't have enough people to work on some of these. So what's happening? What's our contingency for this? Our contingency is just what we said in the slide. We're moving people around almost like hot potatoes to be able to work on different different aspects of the project based on is the customer screaming and what needs to be done. And of course, our team is just kind of getting burnt out because they can't really get up to speed on something because they're bouncing from one to the other to try to keep all the plates spinning that's needed for the company. And so I don't know what the real main deal is here, but I mean, everybody's hiring and everybody's needing new people, and that includes project managers and project staff because once again, there's not enough people to do everything we're wanting done. We also have planning failure, and planning failure is a very common kind of failure. And part of that is because a lot of times we keep stuff in our head and we don't put it on paper and we don't turn it into a plan. So if you're running a traditional project, then planning is going to be a huge piece of that because you're going to have all the sub plans for the project management plan created for that project. And you're going to tweak them, you're going to update them, they're going to be impacted by change orders, but you would already have those plans. So planning failure, because subject matter experts are spread thin, and our own on other projects are moved to high profile or crisis project, it prevented them from attending team meetings. So the people who know the most many times are being rushed around to all the fires, trying to help us put out fires on all the other projects. So they're not in a team meeting where we discuss something and they probably would have caught that there was some part of the information or the plan that was missing. So these meetings focus on planning additional work associated with the project, and it caused some of these plans to be deficient because of their lack of input. So plans were shallow plans, let me call it that, and I think most of us would know that what we're talking about. You've got bullet points of what to do, but no narrative, no question and answer. We just see a bullet point, and bullet points on some of these are going to be very distorted because what I read a bullet point to mean and what you read it to mean will be something different. It could be that we have political failure with that project. Internal leadership does not buy into the project and its outcomes. They politically sabotage the project outcomes. They limit personnel availability for working on it. All of these political kind of things can happen with the project. They don't believe it. They don't buy into it. Or they did buy into it, but now not now. The goals have changed. But you're already into the middle of that project, so you're trying to salvage it and salvage something so that you have the capability of being able to hand off something at the end of this project. All right, so once we have discovered that these are potential failures to any kind of project, now we have to try to come up with how we're going to pick a solution. And there are several areas which might need realigned to the project scope, goals, and objectives. And a lot of times when we have change orders, that will change things. But remember, a change order should not be done in a vacuum. That change order, you have to look at what that's going to do to the schedule, and what's it going to do to our budget, what's it going to do to the quality, what's it going to do to the performance of that project. So we have to look at it through those eyes. So as we look through that, there's several areas which might need a lot realignment to the scope and goals. We could looking at governance, the business case, the methodology, whether it's waterfall or agile, the technology itself, the politics, and I'm talking about internal politics is what I'm talking about, and then the product, what we're producing that's going to be handed off to that customer. So all of these solutions are going to have to continue to be realigned based on change orders and based on what's happening with that project as well. So let's start with a discovery phase and distress project. So this is going to be early on in the project. You're starting to get that feeling that something's not right. You're starting to see that we're slipping. We might not even be quite at 20% yet. Okay. So but you see the pattern. All right. So discovery focuses on where the projects went wrong. Where a healthy project began the unhealthy road of destruction. And so you're starting to kind of go back to, okay, we were on time and on budget here. And so what happened? What's the change that took place here? Not necessarily a change order, but what's the event that took place here that caused us to start descending and getting behind on everything? Normally, a discovery phase is a fast-paced time of analysis to examine documentation and adherence to providing correct deliverables. It removes assumptions and personal interpretation. Assumptions and personal interpretation allows individuals to unintentionally miss the mark and provide something less than desired for the project. So it's a very simplified analysis on the early stages of the project. We were on time here. What changed? What happened to that project from this point on that caused us to be to start missing our deadlines and start missing our budget. And so you're looking at it definitely through those particular eyes. Also, the discovery phase allows the team search for documents to justify the deliverables for the project. Without documentation, the scope can creep up until a project enters the distress mode. Now, a lot of times people will come back and say, yeah, but we're doing an Agile project. There's no documentation. Well, actually there is. Even in Agile and Scrum, there's an element of documentation that one would use. It's not as much maybe as you would have in traditional, but yes, you have certain levels of documentation, even in Agile and in Scrum. And so missing documentation is a common foundation for a distressed project. Once deliverables are clarified, all other supporting features and functionality are adjusted. And so you adjust everything because you're seeing that pattern, you're seeing that trend come about. Now, distress projects and lack of business support. So let's assume you don't feel like you're getting enough business support from other stakeholders, whether it's management or the PMO or your sponsor. And so lack of business support can come from low involvement of management or customer stakeholders. It could be by accident. Stakeholders misunderstand the amount of desired engagement. Now, one of the things that would probably help all of us in relationship to support is sometimes what we think, and let's just kind of see if this is the case with you. Sometimes what we think about support is, why aren't they supporting me? Why aren't they helping me? Why aren't they giving me this? Or why aren't they answering? Or why aren't they here to help? And so we look at it as their problem, whoever they are. Okay, so we're looking at it. It could be management, it could be the PMO, it could be the sponsor, but we look at it as, why are they not supporting us in our project? And here's the thing, many times they don't know. They don't know that you need the support. They don't know that you're even thinking about the support, because from their perspective, they're trying to let you and your team be able to fix this thing and pull it around without having a heavy hand on that team. However, the team sometimes is thinking, man, we need help here and we need input, and let's engage with the sponsor, the PMO, our manager to be able to do this. So you've got two different perspectives, and both neither of those are wrong. Management's trying to let the team kind of fix it and pull it together, and the team's wanting management to come on in for an intervention. So it could be by accident, and stakeholders misunderstand the amount of desired engagement. And so this is why a lot of times what you want to do is go ahead and clear the air and ask for the engagement, ask for the input, because once again, they can't read your mind and they might be holding back on purpose. Let me just give you a simple example that just recently happened. I'm a doctoral chair at Liberty University, and so I'm the head of a committee. I've got 8 doctoral students that I'm their chairperson. And so they run everything through me, and then of course it goes to the committee. Well, I had a committee member who was not responding. And one of the things, I was sending emails and back and forth and wasn't responding. And the frustration is there because, you're kind of on a timeline, and you've got you're a doctorate candidate who's wanting to write that dissertation. And so anyway, after a while of no response, I started firing emails off to the program chair, because that's the person who's in charge of the entire program and who hires us all. And so I started saying, hey, here's what's happening, and here's what I've done, and I'm going to start copying you on some of this, but this is why. And so anyway, I started doing that. And of course, he got much more engaged. Why? Because he knew that from my email, I wanted engagement here. I don't have the authority over this other professor, but I felt like they were dragging their feet. And, you're trying to do it in a nice way. Don't mistake what I'm saying. But at the same time, you need action on that side. And that's, we've all been in that situation where you're trying to do it in a nice way. You're asking for what you need, and you're trying to do it in a diplomatic way, but, they're still not providing what you need. So finally, I got what I needed just yesterday. And so I sent an email to the program, and I said, hey, I got what I needed from the professor. No further actions needed on this. And so I've told them I don't need them to do anything else. We got it worked out with this professor. Now, my point in sharing that with you is I needed engagement from a higher authority stakeholder. But of course, they are not going to know you need that engagement unless we say something. But we don't have to be a jerk when we say it. We don't have to be mean-spirited. I don't think the professor is a bad guy. He probably is new and doesn't know exactly how things need to run, is what I'm thinking. But the point is that I had the engagement, and the program director got engaged the moment I started saying, here's what I'm needing from you. And sometimes we need to do something like that on a project to be able to engage some of the people in that. All right, the other part of this with business support should when we look at distress projects and lack of business support, should not have ambiguity. Business support should not have ambiguity. Engagement levels can be explained in a stakeholder or communication management plan. Now, many of you know that in PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge, that you have a stakeholder engagement plan of how much you need to engage different stakeholders. Those stakeholders would also include your team, obviously, management, project sponsor, PMO, any of those type of people. Now, in many cases, the engagement level kind of works okay because they have a certain pattern. I'm talking about your stakeholders. They have a certain pattern of engagement they're wanting to have with us. But occasionally, we all have experienced that where you need engagement from management because you're wanting their input on something that is beyond our authority, beyond, maybe even beyond our expertise. So at the first sign of low support, escalation procedures can evaluate the issue to management and ask for support. And a lot of times you're just bouncing it up. You're wanting their input because you're not wanting to step outside of the box that all of us have of authority. And at the same time, I don't want any surprises. I don't want my customer to be surprised, and I don't want my management to be surprised. So don't leave the engagement up to chance. Say something. And we can always say it nice. And even, if we're sending an email, even with an email, we can always put something to just soften it just a little bit. Hey, I just want to give you a heads up. This is what's happening. And if it continues after next week, I think that we're going to need some input from you to get over this little bump. And so once again, nobody wants surprises. And management, the sponsor, the PMO, nobody wants to be surprised. Okay, so the next area that I want to talk about for a moment is distress projects and bad estimates. Okay, so projects are inflicted with the organization's culture. Some organizations are weak in the early estimates of a project. This weakness sometimes is carried over into real estimates. So let's talk about how this really happens. Many of you probably have noticed this. In the early stages of a project, we have fictitious numbers and fictitious timeframes. We say that this project could be done in $300,000 and it could be done in 7 months. Well, first off, nobody really estimated it a lot of times. That's just talking points for the purpose of kind of corralling what this project would do or not do, okay? But the problem is what we've all seen when that fictitious estimate becomes the budget. 300,000 that we were talking about becomes a $300,000 budget. The 7 months that we were talking about becomes the duration. Now, nobody had estimated it. It was just talking points that was thrown out. So if project estimates are not realistic, it creates that fictitious situation. And so team members and the PM think the estimates based on foundational analysis, but the numbers were really guesstimates. They were guesstimates on the front end, but which was not a problem in the early stages. But then all of a sudden, when that becomes the budget and that becomes the time frame, now we've got a problem. Nobody has really analyzed the estimate. And so that's a question that needs to be asked sometimes. So guesstimates can cause a project team to experience distress and the need to estimate the project correctly, because what's happening, we're trying to hit a due date that maybe was not even realistic at all, or we're trying to hit a budget that maybe was not even realistic at all. And so once again, you're coming back to question, where did that estimate get into the pipeline? Then the next thing that we want to look at, I keep punching the wrong button here, sorry about that. So next, as we look at this, is limited scope control. Okay, so who controls the scope of the project? Now, if you're doing agile, then one of the things that you probably have noticed is that the scope is controlled by the customer through the product owner. And so the product owner is saying yes or no to and trying to adjust to what the customer wants. And so you see that happening. The other question is there a change control process and change control board? Now, obviously, the size of the project is going to have a huge difference on each piece of this. But if you're running a traditional project and it's of any size, you're going to have or want some type of change control. Most of the projects that need full-blown recovery that get in such bad shape, they did not have a change control process. So that change control process could be different for a lot of different projects, but that's going to be part of it. What level of change goes through the change control process? Now, we'll have some administrative changes or sign-offs and some different things like this. You might have some little Mickey Mouse change. Does it all have to go through change control, literally from 1 penny on up? Or is it certain types of levels that have to go through change control? So these questions reassure the change control process is working well, or will surface a gap in the processes. Regardless of the question of scope control, it's critical to any distress project and its recovery. Now, many times the reason why the project started going through these bumps along the road was because we did not have change control in place. So that's the reason why many times you're looking to be able to lock it in. This is the scope. Nothing changes without going through change control. That way there's no surprises. And then a lot of times what you'll find is as you start trying to get the project back on track or in the early stages, you'll do what's called a health checkup. Now, this is a little bit of material that I did pull from my recovery program to show you, because the health checkup can be done in a lot of different ways, but it allows you to be able to get a new status on that project, especially one that you're thinking is going through some distress. And maybe they're not at the 20% mark yet, but you see them heading in that trend going in that direction. So 3 areas of this: it's the process of health checkup, the frequency, and then reporting at the health checkup. So let's start off with the process of conducting a health checkup. So this flow here, we'll kind of walk you through the steps. Determine what to measure. So what are we needing to measure here? Conduct the interviews of the teams. It might be the project sponsor, whoever you think you need to interview. Analyze the data, determine the correct status of the project. So is this something that's just a one-time bump in the road? It's bad, but it's a one-time bump, and shortly we'll have it together. Also make projections based on current information. Based on this, I think we'll be right back on track, but it is going to take us 4 weeks before that happens. And then also discuss strategies if the future is not acceptable. So in other words, if we're still going to be far off, then we need to talk a strategy to get it back on, which would be like a little miniature recovery. And then last, create action items to adjust the plan. So what do we need to do to adjust this to be able to get this project back on track before it gets so far off? Sometimes people will wait until it hits a huge, massive gaps before they decide to do some type of recovery. You want to be able to move into a very limited role in recovery. So let's look at 5 evaluation models for you. We've got a discrepancy model, a goal-free, transactional, you've got a decision-making, and a goal-based. So let's hit these 5 evaluation models that can be used in your health checkups or in recovery either. So let's talk about discrepancy model. The evaluator's task: they facilitate, they monitor, they collect data, they analyze, and then they interpret the data. The outcome for this is you're really looking, when you're doing discrepancy model, you're looking to see, are we complying with standards? So many of these standards that we're talking about here are going to be going right back into that situation to where there's some standards that's already been written, there's standards that we're trying to comply with. And so a discrepancy model would be used in a regulatory type of thing, and you'd be looking at that. Sample evaluation question is, how did the program perform compared to the standard? And so many people will use this type of model for that sole purpose. The second one is going to be the goal-free model. And so the evaluator's task would be data collection, analysis, and interpretation. But the outcome of this is you're looking at, is this useful, and what kind of impact is this going to make? And so what happens is that you're looking at anything that's going to be useful to be able to fix something for you or to be able to turn something around. So the question is, what happened in the program? What happened in this situation? So you're looking for that outcome-based type of setting. The third is going to be the transactional model. And so the evaluators are going to have participation, data collection, analysis, and interpretation. And so the outcome of this is going to be program understanding. The question that's being asked really is, what does the program look like from different vantage points? And so you're looking at it from the standpoint of the customer, you're looking at it from the standpoint of the programmer, you're looking at it from the standpoint of the sponsor, you're looking at it from the standpoint of the PMO, you're looking at it from the standpoint of the tester. And so what you're doing is you're getting a full circumference of what that issue or that problem was. And then you also have the decision-making model. And from the evaluator's task, they would be collecting data, analysis, and interpretation. But the outcome of this would be effectiveness, impact, quality. And so the question is, was the program effective? So in other words, we did this, we put these things into place, but did we get the output that we desired, that desired goal? And so we made a decision here. What was the output? We made another decision. What was the output? And was it the output that we desired? So that's going to be your decision-making model. The last is going to be what's called the goal-based model. So the evaluator is collecting data, analysis, and interpretation. And you've already noticed that your evaluators are doing pretty much the same thing in every case, collecting data, doing analysis and interpretation. But the outcome of the goal-based model is efficiency, effectiveness, impact. And so you're looking at the efficiency of this and the effectiveness. Is what we're doing the right thing? Is what we're doing efficient? And so in other words, are we being able to do it in the shortest amount of time possible? And then the sample evaluation question is, did the client change, grow, learn in what we were doing? And so in other words, are they different because of something that we did over here? Are they more efficient? Are they more effective? And of course, you'll see some of these same characteristics next month when we talk about process improvement, because what are you doing? You're changing the efficiency of the process into something that's going to be better. So how frequent should you have a health checkup? And that's really going to depend on you. They're not scheduled. They should be used to forecast the project. That's why you're doing them, is to get a health checkup of how the project's doing. Unscheduled frequency helps determine whether the crisis level is reducing, staying the same, or increasing. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to turn this back around so that you don't hit the 20% or higher, but you start noticing that starting to go back down, and that you're starting to be able to control more of the things with the project. The health checkups have versatility throughout the entire recovery effort, though. And the reason is because you check to see what's happening, how are things working on that project. Also, health checkups remove the unknown and unknown areas of speculation about the project, and that's what you're not wanting to do. You're not wanting to just speculate. You're wanting to have it based on some type of analysis. Now, that doesn't mean that your outcomes are always perfect. That doesn't mean that at all. So projects that are on time and on budget do not always end up being successful. Recovery plans can make the same mistake as well. So we might have a recovery plan for a section of the project and it not be the right recovery plan. Or the project might be on time and on budget, but the quality is not there, or the efficiency is not there, or the project features don't work the way that they should. But we're on time and on budget, but yet you have to look at that output. Is the output what the customer wants? Is the output complying with the goals and objectives of the project? Now, as you do your health checkups, there's going to be reporting that's going to be done. A reporting and a health checkup is going to focus on a lot of things. For example, because there's a problem, root cause analysis is something that's used quite often. And so you're looking to see what is the real root of what's causing this project to struggle. You're looking at gaps between where you are, where you want to be, and what's going to be the plan to get us from where we are to where we want to be. And a lot of times that's people will call these get well plans. And so you come up with a short-term, a very focused, very strategic plan that's going to be working to help this one piece of the project. Could be new opportunities. Value analysis can be a piece of it. Contingency planning. If this doesn't work, then here's what we're going to do to be able to help turn this around. So there's going to be a lot of reporting for health checkups so everyone knows what's going on. The other thing that you will find when you're doing a health checkup is you're verifying the project metrics and the standards are working. We can have all the metrics in the world and all the standards, but they could be the wrong metrics and the wrong standards. And so they don't bring value to what you're trying to do. So when conducting a recovery project, the organization likes to bring in a different project manager sometimes when you're doing a full-blown recovery effort. And so what happens is the other project manager and team kind of step aside. This project manager and team kind of get the project back on track, and then they hand it back off to the original project manager and team after they get everything kind of fixed. So the reasons for using a different project manager like this is one of the reasons is new leadership with skills in recovery, new metrics for running the project fast for a very short period of time, and skills for fast tracking and combining the activities to produce a faster completion date. Now, you remember when we talked about recovery a few months ago, what the purpose for recovery is to get the project back on track. So you want some quick hits immediately to be able to get it back on track. But the other thing that you're wanting to do with getting the project back on track is that part of recovery is you're looking at new strategies, new ways of being able to do that. And the reason why you bring in a new project manager a lot of times is you probably have already used some of the strategies that you have and the team has to try to get it caught back up in the first place. And so you've got new blood is really what you're doing to bring all of these back. So managers can turn a project over to an experienced recovery manager and is excited about the project returning to normal soon. However, recovery projects can also fail unless the team takes steps to monitor its performance. So we take the original team off, the original project manager off, and then we put a new team, and this is our recovery team, recovery project manager. Well, listen, these folks can be nice people, but if we're not monitoring their performance, this thing can bite the dust too. We just happen to have new blood there and they bite the dust. So you've got to monitor the performance and know what the outcomes are going to be for the recovery team. And their goal is catching the project up so they can hand it back off. So you're looking at a lot of different things such as project evaluations. So complete the project success. Are we talking about partial project success? A complete project failure compared to partial project failure? I mean, there's a range in all of these things that we're looking at. But the point is we need to understand what success is for that project and for that particular team. Also, as you look at verifying the project metrics and the standards are working, Kersner had some great insights into this. And he said, recognizing the warning signs in the recovery, warning signs are connected to the metrics or standards selected for the recovery. Also, metrics selected for the recovery should not only measure where the project is currently, but also forecast when the project's original schedule will return. So notice what Kersner is saying. He's saying that we're talking about where the project is right now, obviously, and so where we are currently, but he's talking about forecasting. We've got to be able to forecast when that project is going to come right back on track and be able to be turned around. Now, views on starting the recovery. And so let me show you a very simplified process view. And so number one would be creating a recovery quick list. One of the things that happens with recovery is you want to be able to, some of the low-hanging fruit or whatever you want to call it, you want to be able to get some of the quick hits going because the project has been in crisis, the customer's concerned, management's concerned, and so forth. And now we've got new people such as a recovery manager and a recovery team on this. So you want to be able to show some success fast. So get a recovery quick hit list of things that we can do a small amount to go ahead and get that done. So determine how to run the quick list, create a plan to run items not on the quick list, and then create activity estimates for the recovery plan, make assignments to the recovery team, determine the metrics that we're going to be tracking as a recovery team, which might be different than the regular team, and then also create a recovery plan. This is the plan we're using. It might be 6 weeks long, but this is what we're doing to get the project back where it needs to be. And then you baseline that recovery plan because you're wanting to measure it, how we're doing all along the way. So you're wanting to look at all of these possibilities for getting that project to return. Now, in creating a recovery plan, that quick hit plan is going to be very important for you. And then you're going to have a full recovery plan of what we're doing that's going to take longer than a quick hit for that. And so the quick hit plan is going to begin instantly. Why? You're going to show some success and some momentum very, very quickly. And then the full recovery plan begins shortly because it's going to take care of those remaining weeks or months to try to pull that project back on track. So the recovery plan is going to include several components of this, but really it's going to be plan, communicate, remove the hurdles, then management support, and then consistent feedback. Why? Because many of us have worked on those crisis plans where we're putting out fires continuously. That's what you're trying to do, is make sure everybody knows what's going on continuously as you walk through this. Now, let me kind of close out with this about health checkups and distress projects. Project managers are always looking ahead to see what's happening with that project. And so don't be surprised or don't hesitate to ask for the support you need. We've all heard the term, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Well, there's a certain amount of truth to that. And you can always ask for support and always escalate something and do it in a very nice way. Now, let me close out here for just a moment and talk a little bit about something that we started just a couple of months ago, and we've really started having some success with it. For those of you who don't have your PMP, we have started a new program that's free, and it's called a free PMP mastermind group. This is a 5-day group that you have about an hour's worth of work each day, And so the mastermind group aims to assist people in the preliminary stages of the PMP certification. It's free. We're going to be doing it. It looks like we're going to do it about 4 times a year. We've got one coming up in October for you. And so you get 5 hours towards your training. So if you don't have a PMP, obviously that's who the focus of this is for. But we focus on trying to fill out your making sure you're qualified to take the PMP, filling out your application, talking a little bit about what the PMP test is like. We actually give you 25 questions that we purchased from PMI so that you can see what some of the test questions would be like. We take you through some vocab. We take you through a memory chart that you get for free. All of this is free, being part of this. But it meets 5 days. You can meet anytime you want, but you do have kind of like a little assignment for each of those 5 days toward filling out your application and doing some of those type of things. I do 2 conference calls on Zoom that week to be able to answer any question about the PMP. Now, a couple of things come from doing this. First off, you get exposure to understanding what the PMP is going to take, what kind of study you're going to have to do, and some exposure to what it feels like, plus the application. But you get the largest discount on taking the PMP if you decide to do it through us. So it drops from $24.50 all the way down to $15.50 with a guarantee. And so that's one of the things that happens, but it allows you to be able to see the videos and some things to be able to understand how to take the PMP. Plus, the one thing that I haven't told you about is every group that goes through, we do a drawing and one person will win a free scholarship to take the PMP boot camp with us. And so you'd still have to pay for your test, but you'd get our boot camp for free. So it's a $1,500 value that you would have, and you go through any of the boot camps that you want to, but you'll go through a boot camp with us, and then you'll take your actual PMP test. Now, the benefits of this is that we talked about the video, the memory chart. You've got a practice test to kind of expose you to what the PMP is like. Audit possibilities. We talk about how to be able to handle the audit. And then, of course, we talk about PMP content. You get 5 contact hours toward your training that you're going to have to turn in to PMI. 2 group phone calls on Zoom with everybody. Automatic registration for the free PMP exam prep boot camp scholarship. So if you're in the class, you're going to be part of the people that would be part of the drawing. So we've got that coming up, and so it's going to be in October 25th through 29th. And so you can go to our website and sign up and for this and be part of it. It doesn't cost you anything at all. Or if you know anyone else who would benefit from being part of the PMP Mastermind, it answers a lot of questions. All right, so let me close out here and let me open this up and see if you have any questions for anything, and I'll be glad to try to answer that. So do you have any questions about anything dealing with distress projects and trying to put that recovery plan together? All right, well, let me thank you so much for being here this month. Next month, we're going to be talking about process improvement. And so I'd love for you to be part of that. So God bless you guys. Hope you have a wonderful week. Okay, bye, everybody.